I'd love to introduce Jingjing Liang from Purdue University and currently at consulting at FAO, who's been doing a lot of work on modeling the state and growth of the world's forest using machine learning. Welcome, Jingjing.
Thank you, Greg, and hi, everyone. A big greeting from Rome, Italy. I'm with the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, with the headquarters in Rome, Italy. So this year I'm here, and it's glad to see everybody. And also, I'm an associate professor from quantitative forest ecology from Purdue University. That's where I normally work from.
Yeah, so today, as Greg suggested, I'm going to talk something about harnessing the AI for studying forest ecology. And this is the work that I have been doing together with my lab at Purdue. It's called Forest Advanced Computing and Artificial Intelligence Lab, and we call it FACAI in short. Switch to the next slide. Okay. So first, talking about AI and its applications in forestry, and I would like to use a quote from Stephen Hawking, which he says success in creating AI would be the biggest event in human history. And I absolutely agree with this, and I think the using AI and applying AI to study forest ecology is also one of the biggest events in forest ecology as well. And however, I just want to mention that there is a second half to the quote of Stephen Hawking, which I'm not going to reveal it here, but if everyone has interest, please find out what's the second half about it, and which is it doesn't give a very good picture, but I think it is a good warning, a fair warning to us if we do not use the AI responsibly. So back to the AI, the use of AI in forest and ecology. Today I'm going to focus my talk basically on three items. One is the algorithms. What kind of algorithm of AI we are applying to study forest ecology? And then the data, what kind of data information we feed into the AI to enable it to study, to help us study forest ecology, and also the customers. The people part, which I think is the most important part of this AI application, because we need to connect with our customers, with the stakeholders, with the graduate students, the scientists across the board, in order to make AI more relevant. So a little bit about my lab. Okay, so what we do is that we harness to the state-of-the-art artificial intelligence and also the global resources to conduct what we call the globally consistent yet locally relevant research on forest ecosystems. And we are compiling one of the largest global in situ or the ground source forest inventory and also terrestrial biodiversity database. And I'm going to talk about it a little bit. And also, in order to make our AI science more applicable and more useful to people, we are the service team for the ScienceEye, a global research metaverse. And I'm also going to talk about the ScienceEye platform at the end of my talk. So first, I would like to give you some background about how my lab and also myself get into AI and also started using AI to study forest ecology. So our story dates back to 2015, 2016. At that time, I was doing this research that is aimed at studying the relationship between forest to tree species diversity and the productivity of forest. And at that time, we were working with lots of people across the world, actually about 70 co-authors from across the world, and we compiled this global forest inventory database at that time. And at that time, it consisted of about 700,000 plots located across the world, as shown on the map to the left. And using this massive amount of data, we started asking the question, what is this relationship between the number of tree species at each local forest at each forest, measured in the inventory plot. And what is this relationship to the productivity of that forest? And so in order to find out, we were using this machine learning approach that can help us detect the large trend behind those data. So we have, again, we have all those ground source forest inventory data that basically give us the number of tree species at a local level, as well as the productivity of forest at a local level. However, in order for us to find the trend behind it, we need to basically remove the noises and also detect the multi-scale trend. And we were using this machine learning approach called random forest at that time, which helped us find that actually more than 90% of the global relationship belong to this positive concave down kind of relationship between the tree species diversity and forest productivity. Moving on, our research continues, and in 2021 we published this paper that basically give the first estimate of the number of tree species on Earth. And you may be wondering, why do we need to do that study? Don't we already know that? Because according to the databases, for example, we have these databases of documented tree species and all those things, and we already know how many tree species are there. Well, the question is, the documented tree species is the ones we have discovered, and we have also documented, given its name, the scientific name. However, there are a lot of tree species out there. Many of them are in the tropical rainforest, which nobody may have encountered them, and or maybe someone encountered them but did not have a chance to document it and give it a proper scientific name. So this study is aimed at find out exactly how many tree species are there on the Earth. And in order to do that, first we need to give an introduction of the algorithm, what kind of method we use behind this study. And to do this, I need to introduce two very important people. One is Alan Turing, who does not need any introduction. And however, the other person I would like to introduce is Professor Annie Chow, a statistician from the National Tsinghua University in Taiwan. So what happened to the methodology is that during the Second World War, maybe many of them already know this story, in order to help break the Nazis' Enigma code. And so Alan Turing and his team were commissioned by the UK government and in order to find out a way to crack those codes. And in the process of cracking the code, and Alan Turing and his assistant, I.G. Good, developed this algorithm. This is called Turing frequency estimation. Basically, this is an estimator that can help estimate the number of unknown species, unknown information, unknown technology, or unknown something that's based on what is known. And so later on, Professor Annie Chow developed this estimator. This called the Chow estimator. Basically, she is a series of estimators, Chow 1 and Chow 2, to help us detect the number of unknown species based on the known population of species. So this is what we are using, all those methods developed by people ahead of us, and all those AI algorithms, and also by applying these algorithms to the data that we collected from across the world, as shown on this global map here. We have, at that time, we were continuing to expanding our global forest inventory database. So we at that time in 2021, we have around 1 million sample plots located from across the world. And based on the data we got from those sample plot, we estimated that basically across the world, there are 73,000 tree species around the world. And so far, we have documented only about 60,000 of them, which means that there's still a lot of tree species out there that needs to be found and needs to be documented. But unfortunately, with deforestation and forest degradation going on, especially in the tropical rainforest, many of the species may be gone before we even got a chance to understand them and get to know them. And in addition to those studies, our lab also studied a variety of things. So first, in East Asia, we know that it consists of country of China and also South Korea and North Korea, and it is well documented and well known what is the forest condition in China as well as South Korea. And however, little is known regarding what is going on, what is the forest conditions, the diversity of forest, even the tree species composition, and the carbon and all those above ground biomass, all those information with regard to the country of North Korea. And so in order to find out, and also in order to provide a regionally consistent estimate of forest conditions, we have compiled ground source forest inventory data from both the northeastern China as well as South Korea, and also with combined with lots of remote sensing layers and AI algorithm, especially the machine learning model, we were able to get a good guess of first the tree species diversity levels across the whole region, as well as some specific things like the distribution of the planted forest in the region. For example, as shown in this map to the upper right. So all those purple areas represent the locations and the parameters of the planted forest that we estimate in the Korean Peninsula. And as if you look in closer into the picture, and you are going to see that there is an area of blank, basically nothing in there, towards the middle part of the region. And it is actually the 38-degree, the ceasefire line. And some of you may already know that, that's a heavily military guarded area with heavy fences, with landmines, and basically very few people get access to it. And so it makes sense that there we detected no planted forest, because most of forest in there are natural forest, and so which actually shows that this AI and the outcome, the finding of it makes sense. And also we were able to do the similar thing across the whole East Asia and find out about basically the locations of the planted forest and the forest conditions, such as tree species and the size diversity, the above ground biomass, and all those things. So that's to the left part. Sure.
So is this analysis based on satellite imagery or like the ground surveys, or like a synthesis of the two?
I think it is all of them. Yes. So basically, we have for northeastern China and also for South Korea, we have a very good record of where and how large are the planted forests. And so we merge that with other information, including the satellite images and different layers of them. We were able to basically feed into the AI model and find out where the locations of the planted forests are.
Okay, so then what kind of information is required? So in particular, is it like a visual spectrum, hyperspectral imagery? Are you leveraging planted forests are a lot more regular than natural forests. So is that an important consideration when doing this stuff, or it's more like the species color and that's it?
Well, and not only species color, we have considered a large variety of different remote sensing data, from NDVI or those basically video spectrum data to other types of data, for example, the GEDI and other LiDAR data layers. Basically, we are trying to incorporate as much information as possible, and also merge that with the ground truthing data we have in order to find out basically what we get a good estimate of where and how much the planted forests are in the region.
So that's interesting. I guess because there's a lot of data that's available. I'm imagining also terrain, angle to the sun, that kind of stuff, or groundwater would be a big one. I guess which features are most important for figuring this out?
Well, I do not remember on top of my head what comes on the top predictors, but I have listed the papers here, and if you the references here. So I guess well, one of my lab members is here. Maybe she can help.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
And Hila, if you want to help answer the questions, please.
Yeah, hi Greg. Nice meeting you. Hi Jingjing and everyone. This is Ankita, Jingjing's PhD scholar in FACAI lab. And to answer your question specifically, so yes, color was one of the factors, but it did not appear to be a dominant factor because it was hard to differentiate between natural and planted forests in terms of color. So but what we observed is from our studies that the homogeneous structure of the planted forests, like those are arranged like due to afforestation or reforestation managed by humans. So we observed from the sentinel images that we kind of extracted for the planted forests, those planted forests appear to be homogeneous in structure. And then as Jingjing mentioned, so basically the structural composition of the planted forests, I would say specifically, appear to be a dominant factor. And and as Jingjing mentioned, we kind of related those with different remote sensing predictors, the different, the NDVI, like how the the NDVI and the LAI, the leaf area index, the evaporation index, and other different 50 other predictor variables to understand what exactly differentiates the planted forest from the natural forests. But to answer your question specifically, I would say the homogeneous structure of the planted forest was very specifically observed in the planted forests than natural forests.
That makes sense, and actually suggests that the kinds of models, there's some models that look at individual pixels, but what you're saying, you have to have the regional structure to capture this phenomenon, which is interesting.
Right. Yep.
Then one more question. I'm not sure if you have a chance to do this, but have you tracked the growth of these planted forests over time? Like, do they grow notably differently from natural forests?
The growth rate?
Yeah.
That's so that belongs to an entirely different study that is ongoing right now.
Right.
So because we haven't finished that study yet, but we look forward to finish that and start sharing the results hopefully very soon.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thanks. So any other questions? Good.
That's good. Yeah.
All right. And then the other study I want to mention is if you take a look at the graphs to the right. So here we finished this the study back in 2022, and at that time we were able to increase our number of ground source forest inventory data to about 1.2 million sample class across the world, and using those data and in conjunction with lots of covariates, including about 48 layers of topography and anthropogenic conditions, soil layer, and bioclimate data. And we were able to use machine learning model to create this on scale, we want to work a global map of tree species richness per hectare and how they differ and their distribution across a global forest ecosystem. So for the first time, we were able to show that where are the most diverse forests located at, and we can see that it is located in the Amazonia and near the region of Manaus. And also we are able to also show that in comparison to the most diverse regions in Amazonia, we do have lots of very diverse tropical forest in Africa as well as in Southeast Asia and Oceania that has a very high level of species richness. And however, we were also able to show that compared to the species-rich tropical regions and how the temperate forest and also the border forest, their level of species richness and at a very fine scale. So this is another study we done with the artificial intelligence. So moving on, talking about forest migration, so one of my main topics today. But before I want to cover this area, I want to use a very famous quote, basically from Heraclitus, and who says, 2,500 years ago, the only constant in life is change. And that definitely applies to forest because forest has been constantly changing. And one of the things that we have observed is that, for example, if you take a look at the picture to the left, it basically shows the forest die-off, and especially the oak species die-off in the southwest of the United States. And so the left picture is belongs to 2002, and to the right it is what is there in 2004, only 2 years from the left. And so in addition to the forest die-off, and there is new forests being established in the Arctic region or the tundra region. So if you take a look at the pictures to the right, it shows what's been going on in 1962 as well as 2004, only 40 years apart, and how much trees have been established in the same exactly the same areas. So forests have been changing, and what can we do about it? First, we need to quantify, and then we need to figure out what can we do in order to better mitigate or to better deal with the change in forest ecosystems. So the first way to deal with forest migration, we have to be able to classify forest types, because only after we classify forest types are we able to quantify how much they have moved, they have migrated across time. So this forest type classification is the number one obstacle or number one question we have to address in order to quantify the forest type migration. And now the problem with forest type classification is that the existing classification schemes is limited to a few countries, most developed countries in the world. And also they are inconsistent across the borders. For example, take US and Canada, for example, the Canadian Forest Service are using this terrestrial ecozones to manage their forest. However, for the Forest Service of the USDA, they are using an entirely different way of defining what they define the forest types. And so those forest type classification schemes are entirely different across the borders, and so that they are not, they cannot be compared. In order to do that, we have to classify the forest. In order to do that, we have to find the data that can help us classify the forest across the whole continent. So for this particular study, we have compiled the data from the US and Canada. And also we have compiled the data that are temporarily different. So to the left, it shows the data, the forest inventory data we compiled between the period of 2000 to 2019. And to the right, we have the data that the forest inventory data for the same continent between 1970 and 1999. And there, the density is different, and however, we are taking measures in order to filling up all those holes in the area that belong to the between 1970 and 2009. And in order to introduce forest type migration, I have to first highlight that there is a significant difference between what we perceived as tree species migration and the forest type migration here that are listed here. And in order to better speak of that, we are using this hypothesis that is called Markowitz's portfolio theory of investment. And for those of you who are not familiar with this term, basically this the portfolio theory of investment is the one that basically tells you that it is not a good thing to put all your eggs in one basket. And actually what that theory says is it's best to actually put your eggs in as diverse basket as possible. And what we are doing is that we are making we are based on our hypothesis on this portfolio theory of investment, and we come up with this formula that basically says this forest type shift is a function of tree species shift. You know, the migration of individual tree species, and however there is a difference term. Now, this difference, this term differentiate between tree species migration and forest migration. It is what we call this covariance term. This covariance term is what we call this. We call it the portfolio effect. And what it says is that if tree species migration are having a positive covariance, we are going to increase the forest type migration speed. However, if a tree species are having a negative covariance, and actually the forest type migration speed is going to be slower than the tree species migration speed. And I'm going to illustrate that to you next. But before that, I would like to just quickly browse through the AI, the algorithms that we're using for defining the forest type, for classifying the forest type. Basically, what we do is that we are using our forest tree data, the single tree level forest inventory data from the whole continent, together combined with other covariates, including the bioclimate, topography, forest height, and anthropogenic information. And we are using the autoencoder neural network, and to basically simplify all those data to different levels. One is at the species level, you know, how much are the species differ from one another. And then we also have other levels, for example, species plus bioclimate and the species plus bioclimate plus forest height data. Basically, we are trying to figure out using what level of combination would help us best classify our forest types. And then after the finding the best approach, we are taking iterations and also using the random forest, the machine learning models, to help us create the map of the geographic distribution of forest type classification. And so this is the method we were using for the forest type classification. And using this result, as well as the ground source data and also the other covariates, we were able to differentiate the whole continent into 3 main regions: boreal, west, and east regions. And also within each region, we were able to classify the forest into different types of forest, into forest types. Okay, for example, this yellow color, one shade of yellow color here is branded EN. It represents white oak hickory forest type that is abundant near the Appalachian Mountains and also the Central Appalachian hardwood forest. And I'm going to use this as an example because I'm going to come back to this particular forest type and tell a story behind it. Okay, so and after classifying the forest and after comparing what is going on in those forests between two periods, as I showed you. So one period is between 1970 to year 1999, and then the other period is from 2000 to 2019. And then we were able to estimate how those forest types have changed across the whole continent. And here is a simple animation, basically shows that how the forest type have changed between 1970 to 2020. And then the color schemes were the same as what I showed you in the map before. But to better illustrate, to better summarize what we have found so far, to the left is a map showing the speed of how much forest type have migrated per decade. So the unit is in kilometer per decade. And as you can see that across the whole continent, especially in the boreal region, in Alaska, as well as northeast Canada, and also some regions in the boreal and the northern hardwood regions to the east, we have the forest type shifting at a very high speed, about 100 kilometers per decade, and that is more than 10 on average more than 10 kilometers per year. And this is quite a lot. And you may some of you, if you are familiar with previous studies on forest on tree species migration speed, and basically it is found that tree species are migrating on average about 2 kilometers somewhere in the neighborhood per year. And what we found here is that the forest type are migrating 5 times faster for some forest types than its underlying tree species migration speed, and which is actually illustrated in this chart to the right. So if you take a look at this chart to the right, and this is a column graph showing for different forest types, okay, what are the difference between the forest migration speed and tree species migration speed. So forest type migration speed is in red, and the tree species migration speed is in blue. And when forest migration exceeds tree species migration speed, and all those we will grouping all those forest types to the left, and then we are grouping all the forest types that with the species migration speed higher than the forest type migration speed, and those are few forest types here to the right. So what we see here is that a majority of forest types, they have a forest type migration speed much higher than tree species, the migration speed, and only for less than 7 forest types here to the right, we have tree species migration speed on average higher than forest type migration speed. Okay, so what does that mean to us? First, the forests are migrating much faster than we had expected, because previously our understanding of forest migration speed is based on tree species migration speed. But here, basically, we show that the forest as an aggregation of different tree species, it is migrating much faster because of this portfolio effect. And then because of that, the existing forest management and conservation, they have to adapt because if we do not incorporate forest migration in it, we are lagging behind what is really happening right now. And and in addition to that, because many of the cultures and identities of people, especially the cultures of indigenous communities, they are tied to the surrounding forest types. Okay, not one or two tree species surrounding them, but the entire forest surrounding them. The fast migrating of forest may mean a lot to them, may create a lot of impact to those people. So that because what the type of forest they are familiar with when they are young may be quite different when they grow up. So this may create a kind of a culture shock to local communities that we have to deal with. In addition, there is a significant of socio-economic impact we have to deal with that comes from this forest migration. First, forest migration disrupts timber supply, right? When the tree species are different, when the tree species composition becomes different over time and with such a fast speed, it is going to affect the timber supply. And for example, here I'm using this white oak hickory forest because it is one of the main commercial forest types in the eastern part of the United States. And as we can see here on the map here, the present distribution of the forest is a lot different from the past. And the past, when we talk about past, it is only 20 years ago. It is not that a distant past. But as you can see, the 20 years already makes a huge difference. Yeah, and also people have already found that the white oak and the oak forest, especially the white oak species, they are fast declining in the region. And so, in addition to the timber supply, it creates downstream financial implications as well. So if you take a look at the pictures here to the right, the bottom picture, it is a picture showing the bourbon industry. And maybe some of you may not understand why this declining of the white oak hickory forest may have an impact on the bourbon industry. So to help explain that, let's take a look at the picture here. The bourbon has to be aged in white oak barrels. And so what happens if we are using white oaks? All those barrels cannot be created, and then we are having a difficulty of aging the bourbons. So this is one of the typical examples where timber supply is disrupted. There is substantial downstream financial implications. And this bourbon industry, for example, is $1 billion industry every year, and with lots of employment, lots of people's livelihood on stake if we are not going to recover all the white oak supplies in the region. Okay, so what are we going to do next? Okay, so yes,
about migration. So let me understand the portfolio idea, because that seems like a kind of a deep insight. So are you saying that forests with more homogeneous tree species migrate faster?
Not that, it does not mean that. So it depends on the underlying tree species and the patterns of how they are migrating.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so imagine if all the underlying tree species of a forest type are migrating towards the same direction at the same speed, then that forest is migrating exactly at the same speed as the underlying tree species, right?
Mm-hmm.
However, when the tree species are migrating at an opposite direction, and that creates a covariance term, which is called the portfolio effect term, that will increase the forest migration speed a lot. That will basically aggregate this speed of forest when they migrate away.
Okay, so then it sounds like this is more related to synergistic effects of different species. If they all move together, then their synergies and interactions are retained. Their ecosystem still works. If they move in different directions at different speeds, then yeah, the mutualistic interactions fail and the migration stalls. Is that right?
Yes, and new types of forest will be created in the local area.
Okay, so then in terms of the wider pattern, so I noticed the Northwest, like British Columbia, Alaska, underwent an enormous transition, right, in terms of forest type. Is that something where it's somewhat different species, or major reforestation in the Arctic, or what event happened?
Well, for those areas, one of the things is that because many of the species there are widely distributed. However, the abundance of those species change a lot, especially over time. So that what we see here is that because forest type is also tied to the abundance and to the composition of forest, the underlying forest species. So even all the forest species are still there, but this changing composition of between different tree species, it has going to create a lot of impact in the types of forest, in local forest ecosystems, and a lot. So that you think that, for example, in Alaska, right, there are 4 major species. 2 are hardwoods, and the aspen and birch, and then the other 2 are softwoods. The white spruce and the black spruce. Okay, now when the spruce forest dominate the area, and then we have a forest that can supply lots of, for example, the softwood timber. For example, the white spruce is one of the major timber species for the state of Alaska. And however, when the spruce timber supply dwindles, and when the forest types are dominated instead by the hardwood species, that is going to create big problems for local industry, and also forest ecosystems as well. For wildlife animals and for people, for example, that used to live in the woods that have a different species composition than what they see nowadays.
Right. And then, so let's say the Canada has gotten through a lot of wildfires, as has California. So you have not a lot of bare patches of land that can be reforested with a lot of stuff. So how does the bare patch wildfire reforestation pattern different from colonizing existing land pattern?
Okay, so what you're talking about is the disturbance regime and how they shape the forest. And actually, what we discover here, the fast migration speed is already partially contributed by the change in disturbance regimes as well. For example, the oak forest and what we call the dwindling or the shrinking of the oak hickory forest type in the east can be partially attributed to actually a lack of fire, because oak, especially the white oaks, they need fire in order to propagate and in order to regenerate. However, this lack of wildfires in the east have partially contributed to the problem. So yeah, again, what we're seeing here is actually a result from everything combined, all those factors, the change in disturbance regimes, basically the migrating of tree species and lots of other factors.
Okay, so then what in terms of implications for like forest management, is this something where you can say, now this species seems to be growing well. If I'm to reforest for timber, for carbon, I choose the new forest type or the upcoming forest type because that's more going to be more robust? Or are these more transient effects?
Well, I think there are different aspects, and there are also different ways of different forest management regimes that people can take to deal with the problem. So, for example, one of them is a very popular topic called assisted migration.
Mm-hmm.
And so what people find out is that tree species are migrating fast, but some of the trees cannot keep up the pace.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and so they are trying to use management to create these corridors and to help tree species migrate and catch up with the peers. So this is one of the ways, but I think basically to make it simple, in forest management we should not only consider what species are there, the identity of tree species in the local forest.
Mm-hmm.
In addition, we should also consider the abundance, the composition of all those tree species in the local forest as well, right? Because when we see, for example, the white oak forest, if the white oaks are massively declining, and but there is still like one or two white oaks on the stand, if you only consider tree species identity, you can still call it's a white oak stand. However, what difference does it make if we only have one or two white oaks of the whole forest? It does not contribute to local economy. It cannot make a difference, right? So I think at the end of the day, we should be able to connect the forest management regimes to the abundance of all those species, and also see how we can create management regimes that can help us maintain not only the identity of tree species, but also the abundance of tree species as well.
Okay, it's interesting. And then going a little bit beyond abundance, it seems like you're using ground surveys for this analysis, right?
Yes.
So to what extent can you capture the ecosystem? Because this is not just number of trees, it's also the particular interactions between the trees and, in fact, bugs, soils, animals, which are much harder for you to track. But to what extent can you capture an ecosystems moving, not just trees moving?
Well, that's why I love forest, because in a forest, the trees are considered the cornerstone, the key species, right? So when you are able to capture the tree species, and you already capture a big portion of the whole forest ecosystems, and most of the other things like the wildlife animal, the productivity of the entire ecosystem, all those are connected a lot, highly correlated with both the identity and abundance of tree species.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. That was very helpful.
Okay. Yeah. So quickly going from here on, what we are planning to do next is, first of course, our study now only covers North America. I mean, mostly the countries of US and Canada, but what happens to the whole world, and how would forest migration, what is the pattern, and what can we do about it? And so in order to do that, we have to compile forest inventory data from across the world. And this is what we call the GFI3D. It's one of the largest and most up-to-date global forest inventory database, and currently consists of about 1.3 million sample plots that are distributed here on the map here. And so basically for each plot, we have the information about each individual tree, its size, DBH, and species, and when it is measured, and also the expansion factor that is connected to the size of each plot. So with all this information, we can get information of the local community right? Its species composition, its population, and all those things. And that's a valuable, most valuable part of forest inventory data, because we have the community information. But in addition to that, we are also using lots of other data, the ground source data, for example, the other plants, the herbaceous plants layers, and even the mycorrhizas and its identity and all those things. We were working across the board with lots of collaborators from around the world, and so we are collecting those data, and we are compiling also a lot of different open source remote sensing layers and make use of them in our research. But in addition to that, we are trying to do something that is beyond my lab. So as I mentioned to you before, we created this science cyber infrastructure, which is aimed to connect researchers around the world with access to our global forest inventory database and other data resources and high performance computing. And so far, yeah, we have lots of people participating in this ScienceEye platform, and we can see that we have over 600 members from across the world and from various disciplines. So the idea behind it is very simple. We do not want to, just make all those data for ourselves and make all those resources for ourselves, but instead we want to share it with people from across the world, especially all those underrepresented and under-resourced scientists from the global south. And how we want to do this is that we want to encourage people, especially from the global south, to propose an idea that we can support them with this network of scientists from across the world. For example, we have a very brilliant young scientist from Ghana, and who raised a very interesting question about how to manage the local forest in Ghana. And in order to do that, we mobilized our data from Africa, and also we invited our collaborators, our ScienceEye members from Africa and also global wide to help this particular young scientist, and which has led to very good science discoveries already. And the good thing about it, funny thing about this is that this scientist now is a member of my lab, Desmond Susan, and so he's one of the stories behind ScienceEye and of how we use data and high performance computing and to help people from different parts of the world. And so far we have supported over 2,800 scientists across the world with lots of female researchers and lots of researchers from low and middle income the countries. And so far the members from ScienceEye comes from more than 68 countries, and we are still having more and more people joining us, applying to join ScienceEye every day. Yeah, so I think that's all I want to say now, and I want to thank the people who help us and sponsor the research we are doing, and I also want to thank FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organizations of the United Nations, to help us better advance the mission of ScienceEye and also connect us with other forest researchers in the countries across the world to make truly high impact of our research. Thank you.
Well, yeah, thank you very much. That was fascinating. Of course, are there any questions on the call before I ask anything? Well, then, let me ask the obvious one. You have a lot of information from Earth observations, which is fantastic because you have the real measurements. But obviously, it's going to be spotty in terms of spatial temporal coverage because people have to actually show up. So, what role do satellites? I'm thinking, visual hyperspectral, like SAR, where you give you some canopy cover, or even aerial imagery, which is far more precise, can give you go up to LiDAR. What role do they have to play in like completing the data?
So to the research of to most of the FACAI research projects, we are using the Earth observation as our primary data source, and using the remote sensing layers as our supplementary or auxiliary data sources because we found out actually through our own research and other people's research as well is that at least for the closed canopy forests, especially in the tropical rainforest area, and the remote sensing data can only represent part of the understory. So in order to find out truly what is going on there, we have to have ground source data.
Right. Is there a role in well, I guess, yeah, I'm trying to think of how to reduce the cost of this collection because it can be very, exhaustive in terms of like coverage, but also expensive. Would like say gas observations, because low-lying aircraft can capture uptake of carbon dioxide, which is a major driver, as well as many other gases. Would that help image it, or would you need other modalities?
I think you mean this may be related to other data, for example, the data from flux towers and other.
Exactly.
I mean, those are all, so those are very important data sources. But I mean, different data have their limitations and the strengths and weaknesses. And I think it's the most important thing of trying to enhance the strengths of the data we have, and also trying to make use of other data available in order to make up the weaknesses of the data we have.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, and Jay, you had a question?
Yeah. Thank you for important information. What are the balancing factors are there to resist and favor the migrations of the tree species?
Okay, so if I understand your question right, you are asking specific species that are migrating fast. Did I get it right?
No, what environmental factors resist most of the species and what favor the migration?
What environmental factors that influences the migration speed of the species?
Yeah.
I see. Okay. So again, I do not remember that on top of my head, but you are more than welcome to read the paper in details, which we have actually quantified the contribution of different variables to the migration speed. And so I would refer you to the paper itself. And then if you have more questions, then I would be more than welcome to follow up.
Sure. Thank you.
Well, fantastic. Thank you, Jingjing. This was a fascinating talk.
Yeah, thanks, Greg, and thanks everyone. It's great to be here.